Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 21 of my Pro Tools 11 video tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Varispeed elastic mode. We've already talked about monophonic, polyphonic, and rhythmic, and the main difference between Varispeed and the other three that we've talked about so far is that Varispeed comes from a turntable playback speed control. On certain turntables, there was essentially like an extra fader that allowed you to vary the speed, have variable playback speed, hence the word Varispeed. So you could push the fader up, the turntable would play faster. You push the fader down, the record would play slower, so you could vary the playback speed. You could do sort of like pitched fade outs or pitched fade ins. In Pro Tools, we can use the Varispeed mode to grab a piece of audio and stretch it out and lower the pitch and also lower the playback speed. With polyphonic, monophonic, and rhythmic, when you stretch something out, it doesn't actually change the pitch. It just makes it play slower or faster if you compress it. So just to give you a basic example here, here's just a little sort of dubstep-ish loop I have. And if I select the Varispeed elastic mode and then go to warp view, grab my grabber tool or the smart tool and grab the tail end of this thing right here and stretch that out, it's going to be slower, but it's also going to be lower. Now, I don't want to change the tempo of my song. I want to keep the tempo of my song 126. What I want to do is I want to use Varispeed to create some sort of creative pitch effects. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new track, Shift Command N. I'm going to create a new stereo track. And this track is going to be my Varispeed track. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull down, using grid mode and having my loop or my grid set to a 16th note. I'm going to grab some of these hi-hats that are up here and pull them down into the Varispeed track. Some of just these exposed 8th note hi-hats. Just like so. So it's just sounds like this. Nothing special. I'm going to delete the quick 16th note hi-hats that are there because we're going to replace these with these new altered hi-hats. Now I'm just going to do one first and I'll copy them over. So I'm going to turn Varispeed mode on my Varispeed track. Go to warp view. Grab my grabber tool. And again, with the grid on, I'm going to grab the tail end of this here. There is a warp marker there at the very end of the region. I'm going to pull it over to the left. So this is just a higher note now. It's basically an octave higher. Let's listen to both of the hi-hats. So this has been pitched up, and this one's playing at the original pitch. So what I'm going to do is go back to waveform view. Hold Option and duplicate this. And I'm going to do the same thing for these other sections. I'm going to replace those two 16th notes with two higher sounding 16th notes. So now we end up with something like this. What I'm going to do is the very first time, I'm going to cut the second one out. The second time around, we're going to do something kind of crazy here. I'm actually going to duplicate this clip 4 more times. You can hit Command D. And I'm going to delete all this. And that looks about right. You know what I'm going to make this one have 2 and this one have 1 over here. Now for the middle section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to vary the lengths of each of these hi-hats to sort of make a pitch up and pitch down effect. So I'm going to change my grid to a 64th note, and then going back to warp view and using the grabber tool again, I'm going to make this one a full 16th. This one's going to be 3/4. This one's going to be half. This one's going to be a quarter. This one's going to be half, and this one's going to be 3/4. So it's like getting smaller and then longer again. So we end up with this cool sort of pitching up and pitching down effect. And the very last one, I think I'm going to make this one a little bit shorter too, just the very last one. Yeah. And we'll do the same thing with this one, except we'll do it with the first one. So let's see what that sounds like. All right. Now, just to sort of make these little hi-hat clips sound a bit more blended, I'm going to add just a touch of reverb to them. I'm just going to go into reverb. I'm going to use the stock deverb plugin. I'll use the plate reverb, and I'll set the wet dry to about 30%. So we're hearing mostly dry signal. Let's actually do like 20%. Mostly dry signal with a little bit of wet signal, just enough to sort of blend it a little bit. And the other thing I'm going to do just to save on processing is I'm going to drag over this whole track and hit Shift-Option-3 to consolidate all these clips. I'm actually going to pull the volume up a bit on the clip gain too, so I hear them a little bit more. There you go. So here's the whole thing. There we go. Cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another Varispeed track. We can actually turn Varispeed off on this one. I'm just going to call this hi-hat vary. There we go. Create a new stereo track. And this one I'm going to call snare vary. And what we're going to do with this one is pull one of the snare drums out just a bit. Let's turn the grid back to a 16th note. Let's pull this out. I'm not going to cut this one. I'm going to copy it because I want to layer the original snare drum with a Varispeed snare drum. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take this snare that sounds like this, and we're going to turn Varispeed on. Again, go to warp view, turn our grabber tool on, grab the tail end of it, and pull it out to double length. So this more echo, sort of not really echoing effect, but sort of like just a deeper effect. And what I'm going to do is go back to waveform view and just fade this out. There we go. And then I'm going to use my grabber tool to duplicate this over where each of the snare drums are. There we go. Now I'm going to take the same deverb effect that I put on the hi-hat. I'm going to hold Option and copy that up, and I'm going to pull the wet dry up a bit more so I hear more of the reverb and less of the dry signal. So this almost becomes like a deep, almost reverb effect just on the snare drum. So let's see what that sounds like now with all three of these. Cool. Let's try something with the kick drum now. Create a new stereo audio track. I'm going to call this kick vary. There we go. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to up pitch one of the kick drums. It's going to use the selector tool to grab this kick right here. I'm going to paste it down here. Turn Varispeed on. Again, go to warp view, grab a grabber tool. Let's make it not half speed. Let's go to slip mode and make it almost like 3/4 of the length. Here's the original. Here's the warped one. And what we'll do is go back to waveform view, and put a fade on that. I'm going to go ahead and actually consolidate this one as well. Whoops. There we go. Shift Option 3. There we go. So I just rendered the fade into the kick drum. And I'm going to put this kick on the upbeat right here. So I end up with, I'm going to do the same thing right here. And let's try right there. And right here. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's try it right there as well. There we go. And just for my OCD, I'm going to go ahead and drag over all of these new Varispeed tracks and render them in place. Shift Option 3 just renders all the fades in place. And we can now turn Varispeed off because the Varispeed is rendered into the new file anyway. So that's our new idea. And remember, the original idea sounded just like this. So we've got something new now that sounds a little bit more interesting. So I love doing this because it allows you to take like a stock loop that maybe you found on the internet or in a loop library, and you can take it and you can do like multi-track editing to something that came to you as a single track. And it allows you to create variations on a loop that is just, again, a boring stock loop. You can sort of make the loop your own thing rather than using the loop as is. Now, one last thing you can do, we haven't really talked about buses and Pro Tools yet, but one thing you can do if you want to render all this down to one new file is you can drag over, we can click on the top track, hold Shift, click on the bottom. While holding Shift Option, go to the Output tab, and instead of using your main output, yours will probably say A1 and 2 or Analog 1 and 2. My Focusrite is weird and labels it Monitor 1 and 2. Instead of labeling it Monitor 1 or 2, you go to your bus and you label it Bus 1 and 2. So when you hold Shift and Option, it actually makes the outputs for all the selected tracks the same. So all of them are going to Bus 1 and 2. So now all I have to do is create a new stereo audio track. And on that one, we're going to call this Loop Render. And we're going to make the input on this one Bus 1 and 2. So it's like taking all four of these tracks and summing them down to a new audio track. Now, the problem with this is you may end up with something that clips because the sum of all four is going to be greater than the sum of just one. So what we may need to do is just pull some of these levels down a bit, just so we don't get any clipping on our new rendered version. And then all you do is you arm the new one and hit 3 to record. Then we can delete our other tracks, and we are left with a new loop that we had some say in creating. It's, again, not a stock loop. It's a loop that we changed and altered, and then we can hit Command D to loop that out in our song. So there you go. That's Varispeed in a nutshell. In the next episode, we're going to talk about some more pitch effects. I'll show you how to pitch shift with monophonic and polyphonic mode, as well as using pitch shift with the X-form mode. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.